A little girl spent her day going door to door in the cold. She was selling things to neighbors. She wanted to buy her mother a Christmas present. The next day, she was dead. And the person who killed her was the same person she was trying to earn money to surprise. That is where the story starts, and it only gets darker from there. Hello, you're watching Women That Kill. Today's case is not about a monster who hated her children. It is about a woman who loved a man so much that she made an unthinkable choice. And the most disturbing part is that her children never saw it coming, even though they loved her right up until the end. The case takes place in a small town in Maine at the turn of the 20th century. It involves a grieving widow, a new love, two dead children, and a bottle of arsenic. It also involves one of the most overlooked public health catastrophes in American history, an epidemic that was hiding in plain sight inside doctors' offices and pharmacy shelves across the country, addicting millions of people to a substance that the medical establishment had handed them with complete confidence and almost no understanding of the consequences. Her name was Hattie. Hattie Livermore was born on July 24, 1862, in Dover, Maine, a small New England community where families were close-knit, reputations mattered, and the rhythms of daily life were quiet and predictable. She had one sister. Her parents were David and Esther Livermore. She grew up, married a man named Harry E. Whitten, and built what, from the outside, looked like an ordinary and decent life. Harry and Hattie had 3 children together, 2 daughters named Fanny and Jennie, and a son named Louis. In 1900, Harry died. What happened to Hattie after her husband's death was common among thousands of American women in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. To deal with the grief, a doctor prescribed her morphine, and Hattie Whitten became addicted. To truly understand what happened to Hattie Whitten, you have to understand the world she was living in, because America in the late 1800s was in the grip of an opioid crisis that most history books barely mention. It began with morphine. In 1806, a 21-year-old pharmacist's assistant in Germany, largely self-taught, working with rudimentary equipment and driven by pure curiosity, conducted a series of experiments on the opium poppy. In those experiments, he isolated an organic compound that had never been identified before. His new substance was 10 times more powerful than processed opium. He named it morphine, after Morpheus, the Greek god of dreams, because of its powerful sedative effect. The medical community embraced morphine with an enthusiasm that, in retrospect, was catastrophic. Doctors prescribed it for almost everything: pain, asthma, headaches, gastrointestinal disorders, and menstrual cramps. It worked immediately and completely. Patients who had been suffering found relief within minutes of receiving it. To physicians operating in an era before most modern treatments existed, morphine felt like a miracle drug. Then came the Civil War, and the miracle became a disaster at scale. The Union Army alone issued nearly 10 million opium pills to soldiers during the conflict, along with 2.8 million ounces of opium powder. These were not recreational users. These were men who had been wounded in battle, who had undergone amputations and field surgeries without adequate anesthesia, who had been given opiates to manage pain that would otherwise have been unbearable. An unknown number of them returned home addicted. By 1895, roughly 1 in every 200 Americans was addicted to morphine. And the typical morphine addict in America was not a soldier or a criminal, or a person on the margins of society. The typical morphine addict was an upper-class or middle-class white woman. Women made up more than 60% of all opium addicts in the country, many of them addicted after receiving prescriptions for menstrual cramps, headaches, and the vague category of ailments that Victorian medicine had labeled as nervous complaints. Throughout the 1870s and 1880s, medical journals began publishing warnings about morphine addiction. But many doctors continued prescribing it anyway, because medical education was inadequate, because alternative treatments were scarce, and because the drug worked so immediately and so completely that stopping felt like withholding relief. Hattie Whitten was prescribed morphine after her husband died. She was grieving, she was struggling, and a doctor gave her something that made the pain go away. Nobody warned her what it would cost. People who knew Hattie before her addiction described a warm, devoted mother, the kind of woman whose children adored her unreservedly. Her son Louis would stand by her, even after the most unimaginable accusations. Her daughter Jennie would go out into the cold Maine November, knocking on doors and selling items to earn enough money to buy her mother a Christmas present. These are not the actions of children who feared their mother. They are the actions of children who loved her. But the morphine changed things. People close to Hattie noticed her behavior shifting, the warmth becoming erratic, the devotion becoming unpredictable, the woman they knew disappearing behind something that had taken hold of her in ways she could not control and may not have fully understood. In 1902, Hattie made the decision to move her family from Dover to Dexter. A fresh start, a new town, a new chapter. She also met someone. A man named Serto had caught her attention, and by the time she arrived in Dexter, Hattie had begun imagining a future with him. She wanted to marry him. Serto refused. He would not marry a woman with children. What happened next unfolded over the course of just a few weeks, and it was swift and devastating, and left almost no room for doubt about what Hattie had decided to do. Within weeks of the family's arrival in Dexter, Hattie's youngest daughter, Fanny, died suddenly. She had been healthy. There was no warning. Hattie received $85 from an insurance policy she had taken out on Fanny, the equivalent of approximately $2,700 today. A month after Fanny's death, 9-year-old Jennie began to fall ill. The day before Jennie became sick, witnesses had seen her out in the November cold, going door to door and selling items to earn money for her mother's Christmas present. Everyone who encountered Jennie that day noted the same thing. She was in excellent health, bright, energetic, completely well. While Jennie was out working, witnesses saw Hattie purchasing arsenic and strychnine. When Jennie became sick the following day, Hattie did not call the doctor. The family physician, Dr. Murphy, lived half a mile away, close enough that a phone call could have brought him to Jennie's side within 15 minutes. Instead of calling, Hattie sent him a postcard. By the time the postcard arrived, several days had passed. Jennie had already suffered through whatever was destroying her from the inside. Dr. Murphy could do nothing to save her. Jennie died. Hattie had taken out a $50 insurance policy on her as well. Authorities were suspicious. Dr. Murphy, who had attended both children, was asked to perform an autopsy on Jennie. What he found ended any remaining doubt. Traces of arsenic and strychnine were present in Jennie's body. An arrest warrant was issued. Fanny's body was exhumed. The autopsy found poison there as well. Hattie Whitten was arrested at her daughter Jennie's funeral. The combination of poisons Hattie used was specific and calculated. Arsenic, the familiar inheritance powder that appears again and again in the history of domestic poisoning, was widely available at the time as a rat killer. Strychnine was something else entirely. A white, odorless powder, strychnine requires only a tiny amount to cause death. Investigators believed both substances were administered in oil form, dissolved in a carrier that would allow them to pass smoothly through the stomach and into the intestines, where absorption would be rapid and thorough. The delay in the onset of symptoms would have given Hattie time to establish her presence as a concerned mother, rather than a perpetrator. She had bought both substances the day before Jennie was poisoned. She had done the same before Fanny died. The postcard to the doctor was not a mistake or an oversight. It was a choice. A phone call would have saved Jennie. Hattie chose the slower option. The motive, when investigators assembled it, was simultaneously simple and shattering. Hattie wanted to marry Serto. Serto would not marry a woman with children. Hattie's children were the obstacle. That was it. A man's preference. A woman's desperate desire for a new life and a new love after years of grief and addiction, and the slow erosion of everything she had been before the morphine took hold. Two little girls stood between her and what she wanted. She removed them. Hattie pleaded not guilty. She was held in custody by Deputy Sheriff Leslie Curtis, who allowed her to spend the night before her formal custody in her son Lewis's home. A concession that speaks to the community's continued uncertainty about the woman they had known, even in the face of what the evidence was showing. On November 30th, 1902, Deputy Curtis brought Hattie to his home under house arrest. When he went out to the barn to feed his horses, Hattie Whitten acted with the same quiet deliberateness she had applied to everything else in this case. She took 2 towels. She tied them together into a noose. She attached the noose to the bedpost, and she hanged herself. When Curtis returned from the barn, she was already dead. No trial ever took place. No verdict was ever rendered. Hattie Whitten never made a statement about what she had done or why. The only accounting she gave was the one written in the evidence: the arsenic purchase, the delayed postcard, the insurance policies, the poisons in her daughter's bodies. Jennie had been working in the cold to buy her mother a Christmas present. She never got to give it. At the end of every episode, if I can find the killer's birthday, I take a look at their zodiac sign, because it gives us an interesting lens through which to view who they were. Hattie Whitten was born on July 24th, 1862. That makes her a Leo. Leos are known for being warm, bold, and deeply feeling. They are ruled by the heart. They love fiercely, and they are loved fiercely in return. And when you look at the evidence from the people around Hattie, that warmth was real. Lewis stood by her even after the accusations. Jennie spent her last healthy day working in the November cold to earn a gift for her mother. Those children were not afraid of Hattie. They adored her. And that is perhaps the most painful detail in this entire story, because the warmth was real and the love was real, and so was the poison. Leos are also people ruled by desire, by the need to have what their hearts have set on. They can be, at their worst, willing to do almost anything to clear the path toward what they want. They trust their instincts over rational calculation. They act from feeling rather than reason. Hattie Whitten loved her daughters. She also wanted Serto. and in the fog of a morphine addiction that had been reshaping her mind and her judgment for years. One of those truths eventually overwhelmed the other. The Leo who loved her children and the Leo who poisoned them were the same woman. That is the hardest part of this case to hold in mind, and the most important. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to learn more, check out my playlist. There are plenty more stories waiting for you.